Welcome to our session today, Artists in Schools and Communities grant program. And we will run through this overview, and then again, we'll have plenty of time, I hope, for question and discussion. Our little agenda for this part of the session today is that I'll give a little history and background on this program. Then we'll go through the particulars of each of the two grant processes included under AISC. We'll dig into the grants management system for those of you who are not familiar and cover a few things on the application process that will be new to those even who have applied in the past. And then we'll talk about a few best practices regarding this grant program and just grant writing in general. And then we'll talk about a little bit of strategy of how to use these grants to your advantage and leave room for a question and answer time. So a bit of background on this grant program. First of all, we have had Artists in Schools and Communities grants at the Montana Arts Council as an opportunity for about the last 50 years, believe it or not. We haven't always named each process the same over those years, but we have had this program in existence for a very long time. And in fact, it does mirror programs that exist in other states via their state arts agencies. In every fiscal year offered over the last decade, there have typically been at least 2 separate grant opportunities, sometimes 3. And I'll just throw a little note out there just to give you an idea of the growth of this program. I am just approaching 8 years at the Montana Arts Council in my role as Arts Education Director. And the first year I was on staff, I believe we awarded $117,000 approximately in grants that spring. And we are now up to a budget of $275,000 in grants in this program. This program is meant to serve learners of every age and ability, from those encountering their very first art experience to an experience that might build on their prior knowledge. This provides nonprofit organizations an opportunity to achieve mission-driven outreach. And the grant projects range from single-day opportunities to multi-week opportunities, sometimes multi-month, actually. The program is designed to foster an increase in arts learning opportunities for all Montanans. And what I would say about that is there is a reason why I refer to our grantees as grant partners. As staff of one, department of one in our arts education department here at MAC, I could never achieve what you all help us achieve to the benefit of learners from all over the state. So in advance, thank you so much for the work that you are doing or hope to do using this grant opportunity. AISC places a priority on robust arts learning in all forms. In other words, building skill, learning vocabulary around art making, and a variety of knowledge that builds on itself. And that is being mentioned right now, mainly because, ironically, when we're talking about older learners who are also served through this program, there is this tendency to think that what older adult learners need is maybe a one-off opportunity where they drop in sort of an arts and crafts situation. It's our job to ensure that learners of every age and ability have equal opportunity to really gain knowledge through robust arts learning. Projects under this category often build on the prior learning or knowledge, and they connect learners with professional artists or teaching artists. And I mentioned that this program has been in existence for 50 years. I would say that the largest portion of those grant opportunities have always been about connecting teaching artists with arts learners. And when we're talking about teaching artists, we're talking about gig workers who maybe move from school to school, as well as those K-12 educators who maybe have an ongoing position with the school. Professional artists refers to maybe those guest artists that are in a community for a short duration, such as a guest on a performing arts series that is, a guest willing to lend their time and talent toward providing an educational opportunity in the community. Last, AISC projects offer opportunities to gain knowledge and or master a technique, medium, genre, or discipline. And that, again, can come about through a variety of forms. And we'll talk about some of those. As I mentioned at the beginning, there are 2 grant opportunities under the umbrella of artists in schools and communities. And this is sometimes a point of confusion. So I've just made it a practice to talk about both grants together to drive the point home that there are 2 opportunities each year: AISC experiences and AISC residencies. So, in summary, AISC experiences have 3 due dates per year. In 2025, we'll have an upcoming date of April 17th, and then another on August 14th, and a third on December 11th. So 3 separate rounds of grant opportunity. AISC Experiences recognizes the many pathways for initial learning, either as a jumping off point or as an extension of residency learning. And what that means is that maybe the project that you are wanting to develop is very much that spark of interest in a particular discipline or a particular genre or technique, and then it leads to some deeper learning after that. It might also be the case that you are hosting a teaching artist that maybe spends as much as a week with a group of learners, workshop setting. And then after that teaching artist leaves, another grant could be written under this process that allows for extensions of that learning. So that's a whole category that I regularly discuss with grant applicants. The request range under this process is $250 to $2,500. And there is no match requirement. It did not start out that way under this process, but we soon realized that requiring a match of funds, in other words, we give you, let's say, 2,000, and you as an organization need to match that with 2,000. That element, especially in what is largely considered a starter grant, was really a barrier to organizations using the opportunity. So many projects are led by or sponsored by non-arts community organizations. Of course, the lion's share are our arts organizations from across the state. However, we wanted to leave open the possibility that a community center of some sort might want to be the sponsoring entity for a learning experience. It might be a library or some other community entity or civic organization. There are 3 categories under this one smaller grant, and applications can be submitted that attend to all 3 categories or just one. That does complicate the application somewhat in that there are many questions in a grant application that may or may not need to be answered depending on your project. The 3 categories are tools, supplies, and equipment, transportation to connect learners with art or artists, and arts experiences involving artists, arts organizations, museum settings, live performance, all the many things. And those can come in a wide variety of forms, both in person and virtual, including hands-on or not. And this next bullet point kind of gives you some ideas of the directions you could go. But what I regularly say is that the grantees themselves are teaching us the many ways that this grant can be used. So lecture demonstration is typically arts learning that does not involve hands-on, where an artist is talking about their art form, their process of creating their art, that kind of thing. It could also be that learners are attending a performance and maybe there's a talk back. Shakespeare in the Parks is one example that does this regularly, where they might go into the schools, perform for the student body, and then have a talkback session where students have a chance to answer questions. Um, this could also be a virtual studio visit to share conversation with an artist. I think this is particularly great for maybe high school age students thinking about their future career, college age students as well, who just want a chance to sort of pick the brain of the artist that they're spending time with. Um, these projects, I think, are highly conducive to arts integration projects where multiple areas of learning are being covered. Let's say a visual art and a science related project in a school setting, but it can also involve Indian Education for All. And maybe it's a project that is in particular trying to use multiple disciplines within the arts on one project. AISC residencies, on the other hand, has only one deadline per year coming up on March 17th. This continues MAC's tradition of supporting teaching artist-led, in other words, artists in residence, experiential learning experiences. Redundant there. A request range of $2,500 to $10,000 is possible. And there is a match required in this case. If you have been a recipient of this grant before, the match is 1-to-1. There is an exception for tribal K-12 schools or Class C or smaller schools, and also for first-time applicants. So a 2-to-1 match means that if your grant project was, let's say, a $15,000 project, you could request the full amount of up to $10,000 from us and match that with a $5,000 match. So that's just one example. Of course, you can request less than that, but that same ratio applies.
Monica,
In the case, yes,
we do have a question.
yes, great.
Would working or teaching a workshop at a Christian school fit into this?
Our grants may only be paid out to a nonprofit 501c3 organization. So I guess the answer would be it depends on that organization's status. And both Ginny and I can help you figure out eligibility if you decide to go forward with a grant experience. Sometimes when there are grant applicants that don't qualify themselves, they may find a partner in the work to be the holder of the grant. And that's another piece that we can talk about. We don't do fiscal sponsorship any longer at MAC, but a partnership is a little bit something different where the partner is the responsible party for the grant. Thanks for that question.
Hi, this is Becky Leamy, and I'm with
Yes.
the Sunburst Arts and Education. And I have a quick
Sure.
question. When are the funds released? So with the 3 dates, how soon after that, after the grant is awarded, do you release the funds?
In the case of our next 2 deadlines, the funds will be available beginning the 1st of July. Each subsequent deadline, with the second and third deadlines under the Experiences Grant, those typically are paid out roughly 6 weeks after each deadline.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I have programs I'm thinking of here, so.
Yes, of course. Well, hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about some of those examples. So this process must include hands-on learning.
I have to leave in about 15 minutes, so if I sign off,
sure,
I apologize.
Yep.
Thank
That's
you.
all right. Thank you. Yeah. So these grant projects must include hands-on learning. In all of our grant programs, we put a high priority on that experiential learning. But under the experiences process, we do recognize that there are many sort of modes that learning can take place in, including those initial spark of, meeting with an artist or seeing a performance firsthand. These projects under AISC residencies tend to be a little deeper, longer term, and again, must require hands-on learning for that reason. Projects typically are a bit greater, a bit greater depth of a greater depth than the experiences. And some of that is just based on the amount of time. Clearly, the opportunity to gain a grant of a higher amount enables more long-term possibility. The projects may be comprised of a longer one-day session and still have that depth. Maybe it's an afternoon masterclass, that kind of thing, or it might be a multi-day or multi-part kind of experience. And we even have grants that extend over weeks and months where an artist is returning to the same group of learners for, say, a once a week opportunity. Because of this depth that is involved in the AISC residencies project, there is a big emphasis on the process of art creation versus product. So we don't typically see grant requests where the project is centered on making an item so much as learning the process, gaining experience with particular techniques, building on knowledge, and in really experimenting with a particular medium or genre. Often a culminating event is included in these more in-depth, longer projects that might take place as a concert, as an art show, so many different possibilities, including the publishing of a book where literary projects are involved, an anthology of poems, that kind of thing. So I just threw a lot at you. So I want to just kind of drill down into the key differences between the residencies and the experiences. First, though, I want to just direct your attention to the left side of this screen and say that each organization, each nonprofit organization eligible to receive AISC grants may receive one of each type of grant per year. Combined, that's a potential of $12,500 per year. And again, our fiscal year begins July 1, so that's the first day that funds would be able to be paid out, and ends June 30th next year. So the request range is a big difference between the two processes, $2,500 to $10,000 in the residencies grant versus $250 to $2,500 in the experiences grant. There is a match required, again, under residencies, either 1-to-1 or 2-to-1, depending on the size of your entity and especially whether or not you are a first-time grantee. And I'll mention, because I failed to do that earlier, that if you have been a grantee with us and this is your first time receiving a residencies grant, you're still eligible for that first-time status. Under experiences, again, there is no match required. Residencies is one due date per year. We assemble a panel of professionals led by one of our council members as the chair each year, and we draw those panelists from education and arts backgrounds, and sometimes community development background as well. And then experiences grants are reviewed by our council's education committee made up of 5 council members. And so all 3 deadlines where we take in applications, they weigh in on those. And if you are invited or if you are submitting an application to either process, you are invited to watch either the large panel discussion under residencies or any of the experiences meetings of the Arts Education Committee. And although you're not allowed to speak on your behalf during those meetings, it is a great resource, whether you are funded or not, because you will hear the feedback of the committee members, and they often have really great ideas for you on how to improve your project. Hands-on component required under residencies, whereas it may or may not be required or may not be a component of experiences. So the difference there is under residencies, you must have that component, whereas experiences, it's a choice. And then the project category for residencies is primarily those artist experience, artist in residence kinds of experiences or workshops led by a guest artist. First-hand encounters with art or artists in all the variety of ways that that can happen, or transportation or tools, supplies, and equipment are the many things that are covered under the Experiences Grant. And many of those are not covered, at least not as standalone items, in the residency's grant process, which is why we have this second opportunity. So we can go back to some questions. Yep.
Yeah, Monica, the
Yes.
transportation element of the Experiences Grant,
Mhm.
can that be used to cover the cost of travel and transportation for an artist who might be going to a school or multiple schools?
Yes, what I would say about that is that whereas in both processes, we expect that there are things like artist fees, travel, etc., we do want to put the emphasis on the learning. So with this smaller experiences grant, your grant will be more successful if the lion's share of that grant amount is going to the experience with art or artists. In other words, the learner experience, if that makes sense. But it can be a mix thereof. So you might, for instance, have a couple $100s of travel on one of the artist line items, and then also have busing involved for student learners in the same grant application, if that makes sense. Does that help answer the question?
I think so.
Good. Okay. Excellent. All right. So just a few best practices. And these apply to AISC grants as well as some other grants you might be working on. Starting planning early, not just the writing of the grant, but actually the planning to allow like time to simmer, I guess I would say, is really important because things come up along the way and you want to make sure that you have time, ample time to put those into practice. So I recommend starting with just a simple sketch of the possible project and adding to that over time before you even begin working on the application process. And
Monica,
please reach out, by the way. Yes.
do we have any samples, any past grant applications that potential applicants could use as sort of an example or something that they could take a look at to see what a good application might look like?
We don't give out as a sample a whole application, but I do have examples of the various parts and pieces of the application, and I will slowly but surely be adding those back into our website. So if you're working on a grant, just ask me for an example of something, and I'm happy to share that with you. A second best practice is to work as a team, sort of great minds, including not only the artist involved in the project, but as an organization, having more than one member of your team, if there is more than one member. I know we have many small organizations, but if it's the leader of the organization working with maybe one board member, I think that's the best way to get sort of the most out of the opportunity is just by combining thoughts on where to go with the project. So a little bit of divide and conquer. Again, you want to engage the artist or arts learning organization with a commitment to the experience, just talking about fee, dates, where the project would take place, and a preview of a working agreement. It is surprising in a way how many projects take place without an agreement on paper. So I very much recommend that that happens earlier rather than later. And we have had those instances where an organization is very excited about a project and they get surprisingly far along without engaging an artist. In other words, getting a commitment from the artist. I recommend that applicants tackle the budget first. I know this might seem a bit counterintuitive, but it is amazing walking through the paces of putting the budget together. The questions that you need to answer about the project in order to even answer those questions. And so rather than it being the last thing you do, I recommend that you start there, looking at your own financial resources as an organization, as well as just, talking with me about sort of how to make best use of the funds that you are requesting. So again, the budget helps answer feasibility, logistics, and some of the key elements of the project before you get into the nitty-gritty of the narrative questions.
Monica, is it possible to
Yes.
apply through two different nonprofits? So a collaboration between organizations with the artist or the project as a bridge?
Um, we can't award a grant, more than one grant for the same project. I'm not sure if that's what's being asked here, but I'll just put that out there just to make sure that's loud and clear. Sometimes, though, a project is split into parts in which one organization is the recipient of a grant for, say, part A, and then another organization is the recipient of the grant for part B. It's not common, but it does happen. In any case, I definitely recommend that you use any partnerships available to you. It will just make your project that much stronger.
Can I follow up? That's my question. Can I
Oh,
follow up?
yes, yes, yes.
My brain's not totally on right now.
That's all right.
So I'm starting a project that's between like Soft Landing and then the school that I work for. And so I'm having, both are involved with me as the teaching artist. And so, yeah, I think I'm trying to understand, what does that look like in the grant application of like, should I just choose one organization and then we have our separate contract of how that all works and just use the organization that the money will arrive to as the
But they
lead?
are,
Or can I put both
I hope I'm
organizations?
understanding this properly, but you are, as a teaching artist, going to be involved in two separate organizations projects?
Yeah, like one is hosting the project and then one is, maybe it's a separate conversation that's specific to my idea.
It might
But
be, but I'll just take the opportunity to say that a frequent question that we get here at MAC is whether or not, including by my committee sometimes, whether or not, the same teaching artist can be involved in various projects. And the answer is absolutely yes, because what we see as really important as our role at the Arts Council is to make sure that artists are gainfully employed. It may be as gig workers, but any work is good work for an artist. So we would never limit the number of projects that a teaching artist could be involved in. So, but I'm happy to go back to your question as needed. So I'll just go ahead and finish these best practices, and then we're nearly to the discussion portion too. So you want to mutually determine a means of collecting project data and documentation, preferably before the project begins. And there is such a wide variety of little details, I guess, that can inform the final report. We have data that we need to collect on behalf of the National Endowment for the Arts, the funder of these grants. But also that data can be important for you for your next grant request and to demonstrate your work to other funders. So it isn't all about our needs. This is just a general best practice. And I recommend documenting in every which way you can. Video, audio recording as needed, obviously still photos, little notes, responses from participants, and then just the data as you would expect, having someone involved in your project, taking care of, making note of the number of participants, age ranges, those kinds of things might help inform the next step for your organization or a similar project in the future. You also want to give thought to assessing the learning, and this can be formal or informal as much as is useful to you. I would say that some of the, especially with younger learners, there are lots of informal ways that you can have them respond. You can just ask them to respond to one question, either in drawing or in words. You can record their answer like a mini interview. There's a lot of possibility there, and you don't need to make it difficult, but you don't also want it to be an afterthought. So just having a plan. And those are the kinds of things that I regularly talk with grantees about along the way. Speaking of, please consult with me. You do not have to wait until you have a fully formed grant request and ask for my review, although I do that pretty regularly. We all do that in our grant programs here at MAC. But if you are stuck on a particular narrative answer, let's say, you could pop what you have into the body of an email and send it off to me, and I will get you as quick an answer as I can. That said, I also want to let you know that we do not need you to send us a PDF copy of a grant you have in process. This is going to make some people feel uncomfortable, but I promise you we don't do this unless we have a reason to or we're prompted by the applicant. But once you have a draft open in our grants management system, I can see what you're doing. Again, I don't dig into your work unless you ask me to, or as we are nearing a deadline, I might look to see if it looks like you're actually working on the grant, or maybe if you just opened it for informational purposes, because as we're nearing the deadline, I'm just trying to keep tabs on everyone I haven't connected with and give them support along the way. So don't let that throw you. And while I'm at it, I will recommend, please, please, please open a draft in our grants management system of an application that you are working on. There have been cases where there was maybe a misunderstanding by an artist about a deadline. Incidentally, all of our deadlines at MAC are 11:59 p.m. now, so minute before midnight. And that is one of the few hard and fast things that we really cannot change. So you want to know what time your grant is due, but also if you have a draft open in our grants management system, then that means that I can communicate with you. I can send a reminder, for instance, day of, to everyone who has an application open. If you don't have an application open in our system, then I'm not able to check in with you and make sure you're on track to submit on time. So that was a lot. I'm going to turn this over for a minute before we get into some questions to Ginny, who's going to go over a few elements of each of the two grant processes, and especially some newfangled things that we've added. And then I will have a few things to discuss as well.
Okay, so I am in the grant portal as an applicant, and I'm in the AISC experiences application that has just come open in the last week, the first one that is due in March. So what you're going to see here at the top, as if you're a prior applicant, you are familiar with this, that we have our guidelines. We have right here all of the due dates for 2025 and for the project dates that are there as well. So that's right there, super easy for you to be able to find. This is taken from our website. So this link right here will take you to the page that I'm on. But you can also find this information on the website, as Monica mentioned, art.mt.gov/AISC. So Monica has included her review criteria, the review process of the Arts Education Committee coming together to look at all of the applications and make funding determinations. That went really fast. Okay. The grant period, award amounts, all of these things that she's just covered are also right here in the grant application. The eligible applicants who we can fund, the restrictions on funding requirements, and then contact Monica with questions. I highly recommend that you get with Monica during the process and just meet with her. She's a really, really great resource that she wants to help you. So get with her as you're working through your application. And if you have any kind of accessibility issues, though, our deputy director, Kristen, is our accessibility coordinator. And so here's her direct contact information. Again, so all of your responsibilities, your reporting responsibilities, other considerations, all of this information, most of which Monica just went over. And then again, if you are a prior applicant, you are familiar with all of these fields here. Very simple, very kind of straightforward questions that are asked. Just to kind of get us knowing a little bit about your project and the artist that you're going to be working with. That could be you. You could be applying as the artist, and this could be your information right here.
Imagine you're me and you just need an at a glance. What are the project dates? Who's involved in this project? What are they naming it? I go to that part of your application, so that especially serves me well. So thank you.
It does. This is where things get a little different. In the past, we have attached an Excel spreadsheet and asked you to complete that spreadsheet and upload it back into the system. And that gets a little tricky. A lot of people like to use Apple, and it's Excel, it's not numbers. And so it makes things a little bit, tricky on both ends, on the applicant end and on our end. And so we've tried to make this a little easier for everybody. And the whole goal here is that this should be easier. So I'm going to show you I'm going to run through this real quick. Like I said, this is me pretending I'm applying for a grant and I want the full $2,500. So I'm going to put this request amount in here. This is a required field. We want to know how much money you want, right? That makes sense. And then down through here, we have cost categories. So what we did was we tried to think of all of the different things at a glance that most of you are going to want funding for. So artist fees, right? The transportation costs, that would be, mileage or whatnot for actually an artist driving to a location. Lodging, especially with the residencies grant, if they were going to be there overnight and if there were meals included in that. Is your project taking your class to a museum and you need to buy tickets for each of your students? So perhaps that's your ticket cost here. Or you are doing a performance and you need to rent a facility. Are you trying to purchase a piece of equipment for your school or your community center or your organization that would be a durable good, something like a kiln that you would use over and over beyond just this project? That would be your equipment. Supplies would be, paint, paper, markers,
Consumables.
those kinds of things. Yeah, your consumable goods. And then other is for all the things that we didn't think of. So if I said I was going to get durable goods, something like a kiln, I'm going to select that from the drop down and I'm going to describe it. I'm just going to say kiln for the school. And the amount of that kiln is $1,500. Okay. And notice down here at the bottom, it totaled it for me. So I'm not having to add. This thing's going to add for me. But $1,500 obviously doesn't equal the $2,500 request amount. So I need something else. So I'm going to get the supplies. Now I need clay, right? And the clay is going to be $1,000. And so this field right here in the middle is just for you to give us that little bit of specific information. You need a piece of equipment. What kind of equipment? You're buying tickets to what? You are going to pay your artist, whatever detail you want to put into here with us. Put you'll notice this top row is the only row with the asterisk. So it's the only row that is required. So if your one item is the full grant amount, you only have to put in one thing. But if you're going to buy a whole bunch of different things, then you can fill them in. You've got plenty of space to fill in a whole bunch of different things if that's what your project requires. Get your total down here. And then maybe you want to give some more information, some more details to the review panel that's going to be looking at this application. You want to make sure that they really understand what you're doing. You're going to pay the artist And in this field, maybe you're telling the committee that you're paying this much for this many dollars for this many hours of work. Is how you got to your payment amount. Whatever those details are, if you feel like you need to share them, they go right in here. This field is not required, but it's there for you if you just feel like you want us to know a little bit more. And so then we're going to come down here to funding sources. And if you, like Monica said, if this is an experiences grant and the whole thing is going to cost $2,500, then you've got this Montana Arts Council request amount that you had above, and that's it. And there's no other funding. But if you are going to use our grant plus another grant, or your organization is going to pay towards the project, or your school is giving money towards the project, which is not required again in the experiences grant. But if you have other funding sources, you can include them here. And so if this number is bigger than the grant amount above, that's fine, that's great. Do note we included in-kind here, but on the residency side, in-kind, which is a non-cash donation, it's donated goods, it's donated services, it's donated rent. If you were using a theater for free, that kind of thing, that does not count towards your cash match. So in residencies, the cash, if you're asking for a $10,000 grant from us, you need $10,000 cash for a $20,000 project. So I hope that makes sense.
It's still important to detail the in-kind for your purposes so that you know what the true cost of the activity would be. And as well, we ask about in-kind details in the follow-up report, in other words, the final report. And the reason for that is the National Endowment for the Arts asks us to report back to them on any in-kind involved in your projects.
Yes. And it speaks to, the support of your community, your school, your facility, to say that you've got people that are willing to donate in their time, your volunteer hours, any volunteers that might be involved in your project, that's also an in-kind donation. So, like I said, we tried to make this as easy as possible with the drop downs and the fields that adds for you, and tried to, eliminate some of that numbers versus Excel kind of, tech issue. Are there any questions about these two parts of because these are brand new parts of the application? Okay, that's awesome. If you get to questions when you get into it, you can always call us and we'll help you out, but it should hopefully be pretty simple. What happens if you've got a funding source that we didn't think of here? You select other and you fill it into this funding details. So we tried to give you all the options we could. And then after that, after the funding piece, is just talking about the project. Tell us give us the details of what are you going to do? Who are your learners? Are they kids? Are they adults? Are they older adults? Why did you choose this group? Why are you working with this group? What is your objective? Notice that we've given you, a fair amount of space, 1,000 characters, 5,000 characters. Don't feel like you have to use all 5,000 characters. There's a nice balance to be found between detailed and succinct, and getting your point across, briefly, because your panel reviewers they're reading a lot of these. And so, get your point across, use the space, we've given it to you, but don't feel like you have to use every bit of it. I'm just going to scroll
It's always
through
a bit
these.
tricky to choose character numbers when you're designing a grant application because we don't want to scare everyone off, but I also don't want to frustrate anyone who is writing away and they have a bit more to share and then they run out of space. So it's that kind of happy medium of trying to choose a character amount that is reasonable for the question being asked. It does force you to be a bit more straightforward and to the point. And most of these, just a few sentences at most, should answer the question. The project is a bit longer. The project description is a bit longer because your project may be complex.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then Monica's giving you some space to upload any documents that you might want to, a schedule. If you're using a formal assessment tool and you want to upload a sample of that, you're welcome to do that. And then she gets
Jenny,
into
I don't know if you said this, but the process that we're looking at is the experiences grant.
It is.
And if you back up just a little bit, they can see the message that I have in there that says, oh, sorry, down in green text, there's a message coming up
There it is.
that lets you know that the questions that follow are only to be answered as they pertain to your project. In other words, if your project is all about transportation, then you're only going to answer the transportation related questions and leave the others unanswered. So for that reason, you'll notice that all the questions below that green statement are not required. Obviously, you need to answer at least a couple of them, but use your best judgment, and I will be sure to tell you as I look at your grant draft if you've left something unanswered that you in particular need to answer for the benefit of your project being funded. Sorry, Jenny, go ahead.
No, that's great. Thank you. I'm just scrolling through these kind of slowly so you can see there's, this is if you were going to purchase those equipment or supplies. This is the transportation question Monica mentioned. So yeah, you'll come through here and the arts, the Montana Art Standards and Indian Education for All. If you're not in a school setting or you're not working with a native project, this, very much might not apply to you. So, like Monica said, hit the questions that are going to support your project and really communicate what it is that you're hoping to accomplish here. And don't worry about the others. And then at the bottom of it, we just have, some assurances, that you've kind of read everything and you've looked over all of it and you've reviewed it. Look, we really advise applicants to, like Monica said, plan ahead, try to get this done, with at least a couple of days, left before the deadline, walk away from it and then come back and read it with fresh eyes and find those, typos and spelling errors that we all make all the time and just clean everything up at the end before you hit submit. Have somebody else take a look at it and put, another pair of eyes on it. Make sure that somebody else can read your thoughts and understand what it is that you're trying to communicate. That's really helpful too. And then there's an application signature page that you will upload that Monica has linked right here. And you'll sign that and upload it and type your name and date and hit submit and be done. And then hope for the best,
Thank
right?
you so much, Jenny. And hope for the best. I will also mention that although discussing your grant project with you along the way, maybe reviewing parts and pieces even as you're working on it, and then doing a review of your grant, a day or two before, at the latest, before it's due so that I can give you some feedback is great. We do ask for a week, but it really depends on how many applicants are asking at that time. If I'm sort of up to date, sometimes I'm still able to give feedback even the day before a grant is due, or some last minute questions the day of the due date. So that is also all really great, but I will also mention that if I am reviewing your grant before it goes on to the committee and I notice that something is awry, such as an upload that doesn't look like it was the one you meant to upload, that kind of thing, then I will give you the chance to fix that before the reviewers see it. And speaking of reviewers, someone asked who are on the grant panels. For the experiences grants, the reviewers are members of our council. So we have 15 council members appointed by the governor. Many of them have served for quite a long time, and I'm the lucky duck who has such a great committee of 5 of those council members, many of whom have background in education or at the very least arts. And they're very top notch. So if you've ever listened to those meetings, you'll know what I mean. The other panel that reviews the the AISC residencies grant, those panelists tend to differ from year to year, but I invite panelists from arts organizations who are not being reviewed in that round, who don't have applications being reviewed, that is. And I sometimes invite educators, artists, occasionally a community member who maybe is like arts involved. Maybe they have an organization where they have been the sponsor of a number of arts related projects in the past. And then sometimes it's just somebody who has a lot of knowledge of reviewing grants in the past. And occasionally I ask an out of state colleague, such as my counterpart in another state, to sit in on our grant review because then that's a learning opportunity for them. And I do the same. I sometimes sit on other grants review panels so that I can learn how they conduct their education grant programs and then try to put into practice some of their great ideas. So hopefully that answers your question. I think there was another question here. Oh, can you apply for the same project in consecutive years? What I say about that is that if you apply for essentially the same project, something significant about that project needs to change. Either it's an entirely new group of learners, it's a new discipline, a new genre, maybe some kind of different guest artist or teaching artist focused on a different process or technique in arts learning. So we can talk about those things, but rather than kind of like phoning in the same request year after year, not that any one of you would do that, but we look for significant developments in a project. And we do have a number of ongoing sort of teen programs through our various museums would be one example where they switch it up from year to year in terms of who their guest artists are, but the program is ongoing, if that makes sense. What other questions do you have? I know we've run over time and I do want to thank you all for coming, but for those of you who can stay on, I'm happy to answer as many questions as needed before we hop off today. So anyone? And feel free to just unmute yourself and just speak. You don't have to put it in the chat if you have a question. Thank you so much. It doesn't look like we have more questions at this time, but please believe me when I say I'm here. Oh, okay.
Sorry, we have a question.
Yeah.
So we've just applied for the cultural and aesthetic grant. So is there for FY26? So is there any issue with applying for these as well as being
Not for this,
that?
not for this grant program.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you for asking.
No.
Thank you.
Monica, this is Annie. Question for
Hi, Annie.
you ladies. We're in the beginning stages of developing a makerspace for Lincoln, working with the Lincoln Art Council, and I can see these grants down the road as we develop a nonprofit, but I'm also wondering if there's other areas that you might suggest to aid in the development of the makerspace for grants.
Well, this grant doesn't really, maybe help you with the infrastructure, but any makerspace, is going to be made up of great tools and materials, for the use of those involved. So certainly the experiences grant can be used for that. We do typically put the emphasis on something that goes beyond sort of everyday ordinary supplies. So rather than it being for like standard pencils and paper, it might be something like a small printing press, for instance.
Right.
So yeah, none of our grants really at the Arts Council, you know, provide funds for building purposes. So that's unfortunate. It would be nice if we were handing out those kinds of grants, but does that help answer your question, Annie?
It does. And this is
Okay.
exciting information for down the road. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh yeah, great. I'm so glad you're here. The other thing that this little question and answer part of things was meant to include was a little discussion on strategy, I guess. And I know this seems very obvious, but you might really want to, look at these opportunities as a whole and just ensure that you're using the right grant for your best advantage. Um, the The thing that I guess you need to think about in advance is which grant project can you easily find matching funds for, and which grant project can you not? Because that might answer a question right out of the gate. Use the experiences grant for a project that, alleviates that matching requirement. Would be one example, but there might be others that you're thinking of now. And if you want to just throw them out there, I'll do my best to answer them, but certainly, strategizing the hands-on versus not, matching funds or not, those are some kind of key elements in terms of the strategy for your organization to just making sure that, you're able to maximize the opportunity. I see Jenny is sharing my contact information because I jumped off the slides before my fancy dancy last slide, and I'm not going back to it, but 444-6522 is my direct line, and then monica.grable, Grable, at mt.gov is my email. And I don't have this on my signature on my email just yet, but soon you'll see an opportunity to sign up for a meeting with me, because as we approach these deadlines, my schedule gets a little bit tight. So, but the other message I really want to put across is that I am always happy to meet with groups. Maybe it's your grant team, or maybe it's a group of like-minded teachers who are each working on separate projects, but they're willing to meet together just to sort of maximize all our time, and, whatever works for you. Yesterday, I met with our performing arts organizations across the state for a little bit for that session. So sometimes I do dedicated sessions for, educators and or, arts partners working in various realms. So I am always happy to help you, but also to get to know everyone across the state, being in the supporting role and also being the people connector. Those are my favorite elements of the job. So hopefully I can be of some help to you in the year ahead. And Jenny, do we have any other questions that I missed?
I don't think so.
Can I
You're
just
doing
say
a great
really
job of answering them. Yeah.
Can,
Oh, hey,
can I
Deirdre.
say really quickly, thanks Monica and Ginny for the
Yeah.
presentation, but we got our residencies part, I think this is our second year with it, and it has just been hugely successful, and we really could not do this without the Montana Arts Council behind us. So I do feel like there's this pressure to constantly get more and more help with the, music education piece in our public schools, and it's great that, the music school's been able to be there to help. So yeah, thanks again for your huge help with getting the grants together, and then, being a crucial integral part of releasing them out to our programs.
We're so happy to be a part of the work that you do, North
Thanks.
Valley Music School, and to be a part of all your projects, large or small. It's really a great job I have that I get to see. I don't get to see everything in action, but I do try to make some site visits now and then. So hopefully I'll be getting to see your project in action soon, Deirdre.
We hope so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Zola, did you also have your hand up? No. Okay. Any other last questions before we sign off? Thank you all so much for taking the time to learn about these important grant programs. And if you're in a position to pass on the information to someone who wasn't able to attend today, I would really appreciate it. But again, our recording as well as these slides will be on our website by next week at art.mt.gov/AISC. And I hope you all have a great day.